Okay, let's look at the third problem now on the first practice page. This one says calcium carbonate and hydrogen sulfate react to yield calcium sulfate, water, and carbon dioxide. And I tell you that carbon dioxide is CO2. Okay, so let's start here. I have to write small. This is a pretty complex reaction there. Okay, calcium carbonate. So we're going to start right here. Calcium carbonate is Coke at 3 up till 2. So that's a plus 2 and a minus 2. So it's just going to take one of each. Okay, and is the plus sign. Hydrogen sulfate. So we've got another compound here. So hydrogen is H plus 1. Okay, sulfate, parentheses, sulfate is SO4. That's a minus 2. So that means we're going to need 2 hydrogens for every one sulfate there. React to yield. Draw the arrow. Yields calcium sulfate. Calcium, I have to write skinny here. I'm going to run out of room. Calcium sulfate. Alright, parentheses right in there. That's a plus 2 and that's a minus 2. Oops, sorry, minus 2. So it takes one of each of those. Okay, so we're listing now the products. Okay, yields calcium sulfate, comma, water. So we're going to do plus water, which is H2O. And means plus again. Carbon dioxide, which we said was CO2. Okay, so we have calcium carbonate and hydrogen sulfate reacts to yield calcium sulfate and water and carbon dioxide. Okay, so to balance this, we're going to draw the line. We're going to list the elements as they appear here on the reactant side. So we have some calciums, we have carbons, we have oxygens, we have hydrogens. Now here's a helpful thing for you here. Notice on the reactant side we have sulfate anions, and we also have sulfate anions here on the product side. So I'm not going to separate my sulfur and my oxygen. I'm going to keep it together and count those as one unit. So we're going to come down here and we're going to just keep that as sulfates. And then over here on the product side we're going to list and keep sulfates over there as well. Okay, so let's go in the same order now. Calciums, we have carbons, we have oxygens, we have hydrogens, and again we're going to keep those sulfates as one unit. Okay, now if we look over here, we did have some carbonates over here. If I had carbonates over here, I would have kept this carbon and oxygen together and counted as carbonates on either side. But since I don't have carbonates over here, it changes. That's why I went ahead and separated them out there. Okay, this will make more sense as we see more examples of that. Let's count now. Okay, so we have calcium, we have 1 calcium. Carbons, we have 1 carbon. Our oxygens, we have 3 oxygens here. Now these oxygens over here, we're going to count with the sulfate. So we're not going to count those separately as free oxygen atoms there. So we just have 3 oxygens. Our hydrogens, looks like we have 2 hydrogens there. And then the sulfate, we had 1 sulfate group there. Okay, let's look on the product side. Okay, calciums, we have 1. Sulfates, we have 1. Hydrogens, we have 2. Oxygens, okay, now we have an oxygen here on the water. Then we have 2 oxygens here on the carbon dioxide. So let's put those together. So that'll give us 3 oxygens. And then carbons, that's calcium. So here's our carbon. We just have 1 carbon. All right, let's compare now and see how we look on the product versus the reactant side. We've got 1 calcium, 1 calcium, 1 carbon, 1 carbon, 3 oxygens, 3 oxygen. Looking pretty good so far. 2 hydrogens, 2 hydrogens, 1 sulfate, and 1 sulfate. Okay, so as it is written here, this whole reaction, it already is balanced. Okay, it just takes one part of each to make the good recipe that we can use in the lab. Okay, So now note that if nothing is written, it's always considered to be a 1 out front here. So 1 part calcium carbonate, 1 part hydrogen sulfate, which is actually sulfuric acid. We'll learn that later on. Okay, yields 1 part calcium sulfate, 1 part water, and 1 part carbon dioxide. Okay, so there you go. That was kind of tricky to write the whole reaction out. Okay, but yet it was already balanced, so it's kind of actually an easy one there for you. Okay.